Today's session is recorded, so we are on the third web session. It is every Thursday, and we're going to hop right in. On today's agenda, we have our guest speaker, Matt Kliewer. He is the software and platforms team lead here at TorranceLearning. He's going to talk a little bit about sending data from something that's not e-learning. So while we're thinking about sending data from something that's not e-learning, I'm going to put a little poll out. I want to know, what are some of the non-e-learning contexts that where you would see xAPI data useful? What are some of the things that might exist in your workplace or in other places? So sales, live training, performance checklists, LinkedIn learning, behavior observations, online magazine articles, labs. Yeah, awesome. You guys you got some thoughts around this. So we're excited to be jumping in and talking about how you can start capturing some of that data from non-e-learning contexts that you are seeing in your workplace. And then we'll jump into some cohort business where we talk about where your teams should be now. We'll talk about some of the free stuff available to you. And then we're going to give an overview of GitHub team pages. So thanks for joining us and welcome everyone. Just want to let you know how large our spring 2020 cohort is. We're at 425 folks registered for cohort right now. Behind the mics, we have Matt Kliewer, myself, Jessica Jackson, Leanne G, and Jamie Washington. Leanne and Jamie are our production team, so they're supporting us behind the scenes. Matt's going to be presenting, and I am the cohort host. So welcome, everyone, and thank you to our team. Cohort follows a really great broad conversation around xAPI leading into more minutia in prototyping and testing. So we've been talking about broadly what cohort is, what is xAPI. Then last week we talked about how to send data from e-learning tools. This week we're going to talk about sending data from something that's not e-learning. Next week we're going to talk about using xAPI profiles to send better data. And then we'll get into the learning ecosystem. We'll talk a little bit about industry updates and the state of adoption. And then we're going to get into some case studies by some really great folks in the industry. And finally, we'll conclude with project team demos. As always, I want to remind you that you don't need to be perfect to demo. You don't need to be finished to demo. Anyone can present. So just keep those dates, April 9th and April 16th, in your mind. To plan for when you can do a demo of your prototype. And I was just talking to Matt the other day about last cohort was my first full cohort, and it was pretty much my first time learning exactly what xAPI was and what it can do and how it can support L&D and performance. And one of the things that really helped make it click was going to the xAPI party. Going through all of these sessions as a lurker and then going to the xAPI party to hear from different folks in different contexts was really like, oh, okay, I'm seeing things now. So if you want to make time to come to the party at the end of this presentation, at the end of this web session today, I'll share the link on how to register. It's both online and in person. Hi, Judy. All right, so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Matt, who's going to talk a little bit about sending data from something that's not e-learning.
All right. So while I get my sharing set up here, welcome everyone. So I will apologize in advance to anyone who might have seen this multiple times before. So this is a session that we've done a few times, but it's something that's often kind of interesting in a way of thinking about. In the past, we only were able to send certain things to our LMSs and training systems where you had your SCORM, AICC courses, but it had to be connected to the LMS. You could only launch it from that. There were ways of storing data in apps and things like that, storing SCORM data and then sending it. But you had all these workarounds. And now with xAPI, we can do all sorts of things that are disconnected from a learning management system or any other system. So we're going to look at some ways to get data from outside, and all those options that people put in that poll were good ideas for ways that you can leverage your LRS that you may already have access to. So the first thing I want to look at is form data. So basically taking any sort of web form and sending that data to the LRS. So this example is a bulk statement tool that we created. So we created this for a particular purpose at one point, was to get a roster of users that attended a live event and submit them all at once. So we created this this tool that where you could enter in your LRS information, or it could be hard-coded behind the scenes if you wanted to. You could modify it to have all the data preset. This one lets you enter in all that information, so you can put in the name and IDs and everything. And it has some simple validation in there. And then, there's a bunch of verbs to choose from, and then you paste in a set of names. Sorry, I just got user name in there. But you just paste in CSV data, and then load those names, and then you can check this list, and then you can add names manually to this list, and then go to the bottom and submit them all at once. So basically, it submits a statement for each person that's in that list, so they get credit for whatever that activity is. And so we have a version of this that we've used for other things. If you've been to any conferences recently, Megan has used this sometimes in her demos for her sessions, her conference sessions. So if you attend a session, she might test that out, and just from the drop down, I just pre-populated with all the conference information. So it's a kind of a quick and easy way, especially we've reused it so many times for different things. We just change the endpoints and IDs and can just reuse that same form. And sort of along the same lines of form data is a survey. In this case, we use Survey Gizmo. So this weekly check-in was what we used to use for our weekly team updates. So that every team, not leader, but their assigned representative would input their weekly update for their team in here. And this is using Survey Gizmo. So Survey Gizmo as a service is one of the few that actually has an xAPI integration built in. So you can just tell it which LRS you want it to go to, and you can send statements there. So you just enter all your information, submit that form, go send the LRS. It also goes to Survey Gizmo itself, obviously. So you've got the built-in charts in Survey Gizmo, so you can look at submissions and things. But then you've got the LRS data as well. And the next one is a project that actually came out of a previous xAPI party. So every party we have a day-long makerspace. It's basically a room where everybody gets together and decides on a project to work on during the whole session. Often developers, but there's people that come in with ideas and designers that want to think about what could we do and how would we do it. And by the end, we hope to have some sort of project that we can show of some maybe non-standard way of using xAPI. And this xAPI image and note capture that we call Zank is a project that came out of that. And it was basically a way of taking pictures of something and sending it to the LRS with that image as an attachment. This started out with a service or an app called Rocketbook. So basically Rocketbook, if you want to look it up, Rocketbook has physical paper books that have particular formatting. You can take a picture with their app, it will straighten it, clean it up, and then you can choose different places to send it to. So you can say, I want to take a picture of this, assemble them as PDFs, send it to my email, Google Drive, Slack. There's a bunch of different places you can send it to. And on the paper, you can kind of mark these little spots that say, I want to send it to here, here, and here. So it's kind of a cool app. And we thought, well, it'd be cool to connect this to the xAPI for being able to capture these sorts of things. And one thing you can see here in these examples, Megan has used this in several of her conference sessions as well to capture live data from these visual maps as they're going through and thinking. I think this came from a llama workshop. So here's the statement as we kind of assembled it. And then, somebody was creating a user persona. So we had these in this live session that you could take pictures of them and send us to this sync dashboard. I just took this one earlier just to make sure it was still working, and all is well. So for this xAPI party session, it, we had one day to kind of assemble it together and make it all work. So we kind of patched Rocketbook so it could send to Google Drive. And then we use Zapier, the service Zapier, if you're familiar with that, to trigger when something went into Google Drive, it would trigger Zapier to send in an xAPI statement. So it was kind of a slightly roundabout way because we couldn't just go straight from Rocketbook to the LRS. But that method, like as you can see, this has been a couple of years now. This still works. It's still, there's a 15-minute delay between when it checks Google Drive, but it's still a cheap and free way of just kind of connecting images to the LRS and having those as attachments for, you could use this for taking pictures of a certificate, or somebody signs a form and you just need some sort of evidence that they were there, or somebody has a picture of something broken and they say, here's this thing, I fixed this. So there's several different ways that you can use that. And moving on to our next example is our Internet of Things door sensor. So one of our first cohort projects, TorranceLearning, was xAPI GNOME, which you may be familiar with or just seen it around and have no idea why we talk about xAPI GNOME for any reason. Our first project centered around this GNOME, and he did different things. It was an Internet of Things project, and we had several different things like NFC tags and RFID tags and just buttons you hit, and they would all be xAPI connected. So this example is our conference room here at the office. So following the order here, we have a magnet switch, which is used like an Arduino board. When somebody opens or closes the door, it triggers that sensor. And that board is connected to Wi-Fi, so it can send information out to the internet. So it sends it to Zapier again. And that Zapier trigger, basically you can connect a bunch of different things. You can have it go to different apps. We used Google Sheet just because we thought you might want to connect, or collect tabular data so we can look at it later. We turn on a light switch. We then obviously send it to xAPI, so we have this record of all our doors opening and closing, which obviously it seems like a kind of an overkill thing, just to, all we get is open, close, open, close. But we also have some of the telemetry from that sensor. We have the temperature and barometric pressure, altitude, not that the building is changing altitude very much, but that information is in there. So if you had other sensors that had more data in them, you could send that at the same time. You could have people, when somebody enters a room, this, AI trained machine learning sensor face detection, it says this person was here, that they did this thing. Somebody's on a machine, they log in. Several different ways to use that. Next one is actually Slack. So several years ago, Yet Analytics had created a Slack bridge, which is basically a way to connect Slack to their LRS. So we connected our, I can slide this over so it's not so small, sorry, I just realized. So this is from last year. Let's see, it ended last May, just because we don't have as much data in our LRS this time. So basically, anytime you use the main or social channels in our xAPI cohort Slack, it is sending to the Yet LRS. So we can kind of see who the most active people here. So if you look at this top 10 engaged actors, at the time it was Peter, who was leading cohort, I think, that time. So that makes sense that he was most active. You see most active verbs. We just made some simple visualizations there. Hotspots, days of the week. Thursday, obviously, is a very busy day. But it's just kind of a cool way. So if you want to try out the Yet Analytics, if you get a free trial or if you have an account, you can check out that analytics bridge and then connect it to your Slack just to kind of, so we didn't connect it to all the channels because it would just be kind of overkill. And then each session, each time somebody makes a new team, we got to connect it again. So, because you do it by channel. So we just did the main and social just as kind of a proof of concept. And then here are just the statement of viewers for all these things. So for that IMT roster, the bulk statement tool that I showed earlier. Just has all the information in there about that event. And scroll issue there. There's a survey gizmo. I did one earlier. Like I said, we don't use this to submit our weekly updates anymore, but I just submitted one, and this is kind of what you get in the responses. This is what I answered to that question. What team is this update for? All that sort of thing. And then you get it completed at the end. You get it completed for each page, and then a completed for the whole form itself. And for Zinc, I just have a little thumbnail there to show what's going on in there. Our door sensor. So like I said, we have our temperature sensor in there. Doesn't change a lot as it opens and closes, but we do have temperature, pressure, altitude. If we had more on that sensor, or it was a different type of sensor, we'd have all sorts of different data in there. We used to have our xAPI enabled refrigerator that sometimes gets taken to conferences. That's a little mini fridge. Every time the door opens and closes, you get the same thing. Just a portable way to show that. And here's our Slack data. So if anybody has been talking in the main or social channels recently, probably show up here in a second. Sometimes this one takes a little while. So yeah, so all of these, so for Slack specifically, for this Get Analytics bridge, you can see this was set up by Get Analytics developers specifically. So they're deciding what should we call this verb, what should we call the activity. So this one came in as, and then Torrance posted plain text message, and then the content of that message. So they kind of control, in their bridge, they control how it's formatted and what gets included. For all these other examples, these were things I made, so I had a little more, well, except for Survey Gizmo. These other three, I had control of the formatting, so I was writing all the code, so I was able to say, what else do I want to put in there, like browser information and all that stuff. So you can include as much or as little data as you want, but it is very much the same technology over and over again. It's just that now that we have the ability to access anything that can access the internet or can store data and at some point access the internet, can use this. So it's just a really nice way of being able to leverage, like I said, the LRS that you have, connect it to performance. There's all sorts of ways you can use that. And if anybody has any questions, let's see, I'm sure the bridge idea. So for the Get Analytics bridge, I'll see if I can find a link. You could also Google Get Analytics Slack bridge. It's once you get into the Get Analytics LRS account, you'll see the option for the bridge. But I'll see if I can find a link for more information about that. And let's look real quick, see if I see any other questions here real quick. And feel free, as we go on, if you want to put any other questions in the chat, I can answer there as well. But if not, then I'll pass it back over to Jess.
In terms of leaking up non-e-learning data with e-learning data in the reporting tools, how's that done, Matt? And this comes from Michael.
Michael. So that is something that you want to think about. Ideally, well, so it depends on which one you do first. You want the second one you do to match the formatting of the first, so that you know what IDs to pull, and their kind of formatting is similar. So especially if you're trying to do something in a table, kind of want your columns to sort of match a little bit, your formatting to be kind of similar. But other than that, it's just a matter of saying, well, I know what the IDs are for this course, I know what the IDs are for this external activity, and then just query and build your report from there. So you can merge all that data fairly easily for the most part.
Brad would like to see the statements again.
Sure, I'll use this roster example maybe. So we added some extensions for location and date. And we got these extensions, I think, at the time from might have got them from the xAPI vocab server. possibly the TCAN registry. Use watershed for that one. Yeah, this was pretty simple. There's not a lot going on. People completing various things in different places at times. So for the zinc example, like I said, we did that in one day. So we weren't able at the time to get the attachments to work completely right because we didn't get the formatting. Since then, we figured out how to do it. But I think this old example might still have the old way where we just pasted in the URL to the image. But a lot of the other code, and one advantage and one reason why I like to mention Zapier a lot is because if you have a service that doesn't connect to an LRS in any way, but it can connect to Zapier, then you can use that to send data. So there's all sorts of things in Zapier. You can use if this and that as well. I think they have a code trigger. It's a little more simple than Zapier, so I find there's a little bit easier to use. But that way, and Watershed has a Zap in Zapier. You don't have to be a Watershed customer. You can connect any credentials from any LRS, but you can use their Zap to connect any service to your LRS and just kind of choose from a drop down of fields. Usually you have to send a sample of some data so you know what fields to pull, but you can start to just hit drop downs and not even have to write any code or anything. You can just choose a drop down, say, this is the person who did it, here's what they did, here's the verb, I missed the verb in there, but here's how they did it and all that stuff. You can add all sorts of stuff using that Zap.
And Zapier, is it server or cloud-based?
It is a cloud-based service. Yeah.
And have you had any success using webhooks through Zapier?
Yeah, so we've used webhooks, and actually webhooks is how we did the IoT example for the conference room sensor. Because of the sensor, and that's one reason why I like to use Zapier in that case, because we can just use a webhook, and whenever there's an event that happens on that Arduino board, it can send to that webhook. We don't have to write any code for the Arduino besides just kind of figuring out what the values are. We don't have to write all the, setting the experience API headers and all that stuff. You could do it directly in there, but you also don't know who did it and all that. So offloading all that to Zapier so that you can, if you need to modify the code or you want to change the endpoint, you can just do that in Zapier in the cloud really easily. So we've done that several times where we just kind of update where it sends and how and what data is in there. So yeah, and webhooks in general, even without Zapier, can be a good way of sending xAPI data if that's all you have access to. So there's various ways that you can use this, because it's just xAPI at the end of the day, it's just simple HTTP that is out on the internet and used all the time anyways. It just has a special format. So it once you investigate into that, you realize, oh, I could just set this up like any other thing and send data back and forth.
There's a question from David around the Arduino code. Is it coded in C and sent to Zapier cloud service?
Yeah, basically it's using Arduino's version of C plus or whatever version, their sort of alternate version. But yeah, the base code is written in that. And actually we have that available on our GitHub, I think. I can put a link to it. I think at one point I had a public version that we posted up there, so I can link to that.
Awesome. And Juan asked about, is it possible to share the statements? You'd like to see them in detail. So
possibly, I can take a look and see which ones. I know that one of these we redacted all the personal identifying information in there besides the username, so I might be able to do that.
So Juan, just connect with Matt in Slack.
Yeah, actually, if I forget to send a link that I said I was going to send, feel free to remind me in Slack. I'm going to try to take notes here in a minute, but if I forget, just feel free to Slack me.
And then David had a clarifying question, Arduino or Raspberry Pi 4?
So we used the Arduino for this project just because it's not actually Arduino, it's an Arduino compatible small Wi-Fi chip because it's inexpensive and it was easy to test with. If you needed more and you needed an interface and some other stuff, you could probably use the Raspberry Pi. And obviously, if people in the past, I say people, Anthony Altieri in the past has used the Raspberry Pi to actually create a portable LRS, which is kind of cool. So yeah, if you know how to code stuff using Raspberry Pi, then that would also work.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt.
Thank you.
If you have additional questions, Matt is in Slack. And we're gonna transition back. Yes, David. Anthony did do that. Raspberry Pi for hosting a portable LRS.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So we're going to talk a little bit about where your team should be now. We are in week 3 of Cohort. We're spending this time getting to know xAPI and each other. So there might be things you don't know that xAPI can do for you, or you don't even know what xAPI is. That's fine. We're using this time to get together, ask questions. We're forming. We might have some time conflict, the storming, and figuring out how to continue to work together, and then establishing some modes of operation where we're norming things. Next week is when we'll start digging into details, and that's when we'll also start with cohort team updates. So I'm going to walk through how we do cohort updates using GitHub this week, and Matt is also going to teach about how to create a team on GitHub if you don't have one. So next week we'll be looking for weekly updates, and we ask that weekly updates be submitted by Wednesday close of business, whatever that means for you. So Thursday when we come in, we can review them and prepare for the cohort web sessions. And yes, Juan, you can check YouTube from last week. As a reminder though, even though we're in week 3, it's never too late to join cohort. Folks can join all the way to week 12 and hop in and see what has been done. It is pretty open and pretty flexible. We want to make sure that folks can access cohort from where they are. And if you can't make web sessions on Thursdays, we host them on YouTube. We share them in our Slack resources channel. You're never too late for cohort. You can always join. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the teams that are currently forming, giving a shout out to these teams in case anybody would be interested. And then also let you know that you can continue to converse in the main Slack channel to talk about maybe other opportunities with teams that you don't see here. Maybe there's something you want to do. Maybe you want to do a sensor project. And so I'm going to switch my screen here and show you, go right into Slack. So this is our Slack channel, our Slack workspace. And within the Slack workspace, we have different topics. So we have discussion boards, we have team boards, we have archived teams. So these aren't actually archived because archived mean they would be gone, but our notation for archive is in the front. So it starts with a Z to put them at the bottom. But right now, our teams that are active are Team Alexa. And if you just click on the team, you might not see exactly what are they talking about, what are they doing. But if you click on the channel details to view the channel details, each team has a description. So what they're hoping to do is they want to build an xAPI enabled Alexa skill. And then you can see that even in this channel, because they're pretty active, it showcases who you could ask questions to that can clarify what they're doing if you wanted to reach out individually instead of in the channel. But we have Team Alexa, so if you're interested in that, go ahead and join that channel. We have Team Audio Video, which is capturing user data from the MS Stream, which is an audio source, and YouTube or another host video, and reporting this data to an LMS, probably Moodle. We have Team Captivate.js library, where they're creating a robust, reusable, and intuitive xAPI JavaScript wrapper for Captivate. And so you can see who it was created by. You can reach out to Brian if you have questions there. Team Dragon Stats is using gaming for training. And if you have questions there, you can talk to J-Rock. Their description is, the outlander brooding in the tavern corner unsettles you. make an insight check. She wants to introduce xAPI to your next adventure, and what that reveals will be anyone's guess. So they are just trying things out. Team Early Childhood Education is creating a daycare app using the Early Childhood Education profile. If you have questions about that team, go head over to the channel. We have Team HTML5 tracking, and they're exploring the capabilities of xAPI statements in HTML5 documents. We have Team Interactive Video, and they're integrating xAPI into a choose your own adventure video. They're going to track the user's interaction with scenarios at different decision points and collect data where they clicked and branch off. We have Team Mapping Data for AI, and they're going to explore how to map course metadata using xAPI so that artificial intelligence / machine learning can organize courses based on relevance from user interaction with course and keywords or other metadata course curator input into the LMS. We have Team Pebble, which is tracking learner interaction with EPUBs in Pebble. We have Team Podcasts, which is proposing the creation of an xAPI profile that plays nicely with the Open Podcast Analytics standard. We have Team SharePoint LMS integration, which is capturing project completions from SharePoint or other database to bring data into an LRS, and they're using Learning Pool. We have Team Storyline LMS UL. They're fully integrating xAPI into a storyline file and generating statements to the UL / my learning LMS to run reports and running reports. And then we have Team Unity 3D Sandbox, which is exploring the use of xAPI within Unity 3D. I highlight these teams because every week, starting next week, we will have updates from these teams about what they're doing, what they're working on, and where folks can lean in and help. If you're not sure or not a part of any teams, you can click on the channels button in the Slack and just type in team. And I'm already a member of all teams, but if you weren't a member of teams, they would show up here, and then you can just preview and join the channel. So that is my highlight about the different teams that are forming. And we're going to keep progressing into Unity, into the rest of Cohort business. So today we have a list of free stuff for Cohort participants. Yes, the xAPI Cohort is a vendor-neutral learning experience, but when the vendor community participates in Cohort, it makes getting in and working in and getting your hands dirty with xAPI easier and free. So here's a list of all of the resources that we have available for Cohort members. I'll take a screen capture of this slide and put it into our resources channel on Slack. You can request access to xAPI by messaging Alex Inman in the Cohort Slack. The Watershed LRS, you can send an email to info@watershed to get free access there. Smart Builder is a free license to any Cohort participant, and you can use the website and then send an email. Domino, you go to this website and then put in the registration code xAPI Cohort Fall 2019, tested it today, still working, getting you that free access. Learning Locker LRS, you just message James or Nicole in Slack. LinkedIn Learning, go ahead and message Anthony in Slack. Veracity is free for cohorts. If there's the free tier that they already offer. If there's additional needs, you can contact Veracity directly, and if approved, you'll get upgraded. And then xAPI Apps is free for 50 users, and you can use the link to sign up. Yes, I can share that with you, David. I can share the link to GitHub. So that's the free stuff that we have right now, and that will keep growing. What we're going to talk about today is, thanks for asking that question. Oh, thanks for asking that question, David, because we're going to talk about GitHub and what we use GitHub for in Cohort. So Cohort, as I mentioned, starting next week, we'll have weekly team updates. And the weekly team updates will be hosted on our team GitHub pages. So this is from fall 2019, and it's a nice home page that has all of the teams from the fall. And when I click on the team, it tells the status update from that team. So when you're submitting your updates, there is a certain template that we would like you to follow. So that way we're pulling in the correct update. Right now for spring, we currently only have 3 teams in our spring parent site, which Matt will explain very shortly. But what we also have is the template for how to structure your updates. So titling it with team update and date. And then the first post that you make is the team description. And when you make the team description, you're going to pin that to your team page. Why this is important? Because when you click on a team, like if I wanted to look at team early childhood education from the fall, I can click there. I can look at the pinned post, and the description is right there. So I can understand what the team is doing. And then when I go to their feed, their recent feed, I see all of their updates. We created this site so that way we have a historical storage of all of the information from the teams that have been in Cohort. This makes it easy for teams that are joining in to see what other teams have done in the past. It also makes it easier to just share your accomplishments in Cohort. That said, I'm going to pass over. No, I'm not. I'm going to talk about how you join. So you saw that there are 3 teams right now in fall and spring. In spring cohort, we currently have 3 teams already in our GitHub site. So you can join those teams. If you're in that team and you want to join the GitHub, there is a message in Slack. There is a resource that you can just hover over the triple dots and join the GitHub and join that team. But what do I do if I have no team page? And this is where I'm going to pass it over to Matt. He's going to walk us through how to create a team from that parent site.
All right, so I think I'm going to switch over to the okay. Oh, you just tapped it. We're in the same room, by the way. So I'm literally I took one step over to the left. Second one? Yeah, okay. So, yeah, so if you are not a member of the GitHub organization at all, then you'll want to join in Slack. Do you have Slack open, or is it? Okay, sorry. Sorry, I'm using a different computer, so forgive me if I'm fumbling around here. So as she just mentioned, to be able to join the GitHub organization, to create a team, you can hover over any message and go to these dots where you can find the app. So there's a Join Cohort GitHub, and that should open up this form. And so you can just choose a team. If you want to choose one of the teams that exists, you can do that. You can join the parent team, which is kind of default if you don't have, you don't know what team you're going to, or you want to make a team, whatever. You can join that parent team. If you are not a GitHub member, you can just do by email. It will send you an invite link. If you have a GitHub account and you want to use that for the Cohort GitHub, you can enter your username there, and then you can request to join the Cohort GitHub team. If you're already a member, you don't have to do this. So if you were a member last cohort, you don't have to do this again. You just go in, you just log in, find Spring 2020, and go from there. So this is only for new Cohort GitHub members. So that's the first thing you want to do if you want to make a team and you're not a member yet. So if you are a member and you want to switch screens like I'm trying to. So if you are a member and you logged in, you'll kind of start out at the GitHub Cohort page. You want to go to Teams, and then you'll see fall 2019 and spring 2020. So if you want to just look at the raw data for the fall 2019 teams, you can do that. So for each of these, this is a parent team that kind of holds all the other teams within it. So if you want to create a new team for spring 2020, you can go in there, go to teams, and say add a team. And then you can just enter the name of it. And as long as it doesn't exist, it will create, actually, I think even if it does exist, it'll just append a 1 or something on the end of it. I don't remember exactly, but it will add that team. Now, one caveat is that it might take a minute, or it might request approval from an admin to fully join the spring 2020 team. Don't worry about that. We'll take care of it when we see it. You can still go ahead and start adding your description and update and all that. It doesn't change your link to your team. So once you do that and you create your team, you can invite other members from within GitHub, or you can go to Slack and say, hey, join a GitHub. You can use the Slack team bot to join, or if they're already a GitHub member, you can just say go in and find the team and join it. So once you're in here, you can just go in and look and lurk, and like we always do with Slack, it doesn't mean you're necessarily going to be doing anything. It just means you're interested in it and you might want to participate. But there's all sorts of cool stuff in here, so take a look at that. If you want to create a repository for your team, you can just go back. Actually, anywhere on any screen, you can go to new repository. It will create it here. You see Team Podcast and Captivate.js library. You create it, and then you go to your team and link it to your account, or to your team, rather. So let's say any team, well, actually, yeah. I don't know if Alexa has one, but you can go to repositories, add repository, and then you can link your repository in there. So obviously we don't want to link something that doesn't belong here, but you just find the repository that you just added and you can link it to your teams. It's a little bit roundabout way of doing it, but that's just how GitHub had it set up. But that's how you can link a repository to the team itself. And you can use the discussion as much as you want, but definitely we want to use that for our team updates, so it'll show up on this page. And I think that's all I got. So awesome. Sorry, I'm just rambling, but.
Thanks, Matt. Yes, thanks, Izzy, for that clarification. Please make sure you put a hashtag in front of your team, the £, in front of your team name. And then, Christy, if you're interested in picking up the Storyline team, go for it. It's open source, so anybody can take on anything. Or you could even ask that question in the main Slack channel to see if anybody is interested in picking that up. So we've walked through what you do if you don't have a GitHub or you don't have a team page yet. And we are nearing the end of the web session today. Some good stuff to know and remember as we meet at 2:00 p.m. Eastern Time via Adobe Connect, so welcome. Next week, we're talking with Jason and Aaron around sending better data using xAPI profiles. Like I said and mentioned earlier, if you're interested in that xAPI party where Matt talked about the demo space, the makerspace, last time we did a really cool activity where we're able to track data for folks who are watering plants. You can come on out May 7th. It's in Michigan and online. The sign up is open, so you can sign up at TorranceLearning.com, xAPI party. And then if you have questions, comments, concerns, feel free to email me at jjackson@TorranceLearning.com or message me in Slack. Yeah, thanks, Christy. But thank you, everybody, for attending, and I'll see you next week, or we'll chat next week. Now get out there and go make something.